Hey everybody, how you doing? Today I'm going to be answering the question that gets asked a lot. Should Christians play violent video games or just video games in general? So stay tuned. Hey guys, what's up? I hope everybody's doing okay. Thank you for clicking on the video. I'm going to be answering the question today. Should Christians play video games? Legit question, one that gets asked often, and so I'm going to give you my answer, my perspective. So to begin to answer this question, I think that we need to understand what video games are, right? Video games are narratives. They are a different form of media though than movies, film, radio, music. They're completely different than those things because actually you step into the narrative. You become part of it. You shape and you form the narrative and you engage with it. And when you start talking about virtual reality, actually like you embody it, like you become a part of it. And so video games are completely something else when it comes to how you engage with them compared to traditional forms of media. Video games are stereotypically viewed to be violent and meaningless, but modern day games, like a good game, they're actually more complicated and they're more intricate than that, and they're more well thought out, and they have loads and loads of people working on them and loads and loads of money in them. And so they're actually something really, really powerful. Video games nowadays, like good video games, they actually address cultural and societal issues as well as have features of life in them, such as life and death, religion, politics, relationships, sex, drugs, immigration issues, racial injustices, greed, and they just offer a complete range of features of life. Good ones as well, such as how to cope with bullying. Like there's games that teach you how to cope with bullying, how to deal with having a family member in a long distance relationship with them, as well as that dragging cancer. It shows you and it allows you to kind of experience coping with the loss of a loved one. And I think that's absolutely amazing because the fact is that video games create safe spaces for us to do these things in. And so they afford you experiences that you wouldn't normally have in real life, or maybe that you have and now you can experience it differently. I think that's absolutely amazing. But then there's also video games that kind of have a lot, like they have a tension and they go against our Christian values, right? There are games out there that have like demon worship and devil worship. There's games out there that promote drug use. There's games out there that focus centrally on just like going and committing a crime spree, killing people, exorcisms, just being a corrupt official, like just everything bad that you can imagine. Video games also do, and you experience these things in video games. And so basically there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to video games, but I think that we have to be aware that like there's good things that we can experience in video games, but there's also the bad things. And as Christians, I think that we have to be aware of what our values are and kind of stay away from the things that are not good to the Christian life. Research actually shows that video games shape and change the way that we perceive the world. A recent study from the University of Durham on a group of Roman Catholic young people who play Fortnite was conducted. And what they actually figured out was that these young people, the way that they perceived death and the afterlife changed because of Fortnite. So they had, these were kids who used to go to church all the time. They had their views of death according to what they were taught at church. But that began to change and was influenced by Fortnite. And they just kind of thought that, after death, you can like help people the way you do on Fortnite and you can still chat to people. Really, really good study. Try to look it up. Matthew Pays wrote that. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And so the fact is this: video games influence our thoughts. They change the way that we perceive the world. And because this is actually true, we have to approach games with wisdom and discernment, especially with our children. And I'm going to do a follow-up video to this that actually goes into how we should parent games. But for us as adults, we have to really be aware of our gaming habits, and we have to be aware of the pitfalls that's out there, and kind of proceed with caution, to be honest with you. But it's similar to what we would do with anything else in life as well. Games are a feature of culture, right? Not just for young people, but for adults as well. And in the same way that, you know, some families have a strong culture of coming together in the evenings and watching movies or TV series or music or sports, like there's some families who revolve around and who are centered around games. And my friends who I've talked to, for who that's been the case, I think it's been really, really good actually, because I feel like they have a healthy, healthy gaming habits. When their parents are involved in gaming, instead of like policing, they parent. And I think that is actually the smart way to go. But actually, video games are huge, right? Like they are huge. They're a huge sector globally, and it's just growing. 2.5 billion people globally play video games every day. That is major. And to put that into perspective, there's only 2.2 billion people on earth who say they're Christian. So more people identify as gamers and play games regularly than subscribe to the Christian faith. That says a lot, I think. And because it's actually growing, I think we have to understand this area a lot more. You know, playing video games, whether you play them or not, or violent video games, okay or not, this comes down to your own individual discernment and your own individual wisdom, as well as experience. Because the fact is that the Bible does not tell us how often or whether or not we should play Xbox or PlayStation. It just doesn't do that, right? But actually, I think that there's overall themes in the Bible and teachings and practices that we can take, that we can apply to our video game habits. For example, the Apostle Paul in Romans says that Christ came to restore the relationship between us and God, us and other humans, and us in creation, which is like planet Earth and animals and stuff like that. And so for me, anytime I take up a new hobby or a new activity in my life, or something new gets introduced, I have to make sure that this new thing, or in this case video games, it doesn't affect those three relationships. Because if it starts to affect those three relationships negatively, then it's time to put the controller down. Because actually, I think that in order for us to live a full Christian life, we have to honor those three relationships the best that we can. And so the truth is, when it comes to Christians, the Christians come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, flavors, understandings, beliefs, doctrines. And I think that we have to celebrate that in a sense, right? Like there's some Christians who drink. There's some Christians who don't drink. There's some Christians who go to gym. There's some that don't. There's some Christians that knit, right? Some don't knit. And I think that the key to these differences between us, even as Christians, is understanding that, like, for those who don't drink, those who do should not influence them, right? Because then you're a stumbling block. And this is what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. Don't be a stumbling block to each other. And I think that video games should be approached in a similar manner. I think that actually, in general, Christians, we should pick carefully the genres of video games that we play, just like movies, right? Like you, as a Christian, maybe you stay away from a certain type of movie because the way that it makes you feel, or the things that it makes you think, or the way that it makes you react. Video games are the same, and perhaps they're more influential, I would say. And I think that it's important right now. I'll give you some practical advice. I think that you have to put some filters in place when you play video games to figure out whether those games are good for you or not. And what I mean by that is, like, practically what you can do after playing a video game is after you walk away, you ask yourself, how do I feel? What are the thoughts that are in my head, right? Are new negative things popping up in my head that are contrary to my Christian belief? Or am I okay? Am I well balanced? Am I starting to have like a weird attitude and behavior towards things? And is it affecting those three relationships that I mentioned? I think that's one way that you can be aware of what a certain type of video game is doing to you. And I think it's really important to do that type of internal inventory and just be honest with yourself and be like, there's nothing wrong with saying this type of game is just not for me. For me personally, you know, games like Fortnite and Call of Duty have never, those are first person shooters, right? Like you run around and shoot people. But those games have never manifested a thought or behavior in my head that made me want to go out and shoot real people. It's never led to that, and yet, like, that is the case for some people. Like, for some people, that has been the case. And so I think that we have to respect that it affects everybody differently, and you have to be self-aware, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And you have to really kind of like know who you are as a person and how outside things can and cannot affect you, I guess, and take the good, because I think that overall, games are good. Like, games have a lot of benefits.